On this episode of Substance, we have Kare Anderson, an Emmy Award-winning journalist from NBC and the Wall Street Journal. She's also an author of Moving from Me to We.
When you can give someone an insight in a way they can hear about a part of them they didn't know they had, or they understated, it's like gold to do that. And when you see three people working together who otherwise would never have met, and they're so involved in what they're doing because the sweet spot, it overcomes some of their prejudice, their hesitancy in the past, and they don't even realize till they're done. I say, by the way, did you notice your behaviors? Here's what you're doing differently. You're not doing this anymore. You don't get bugged at that. You overlooked it when they corrected you for the fourth time, and you came up with something you couldn't have done otherwise. So I believe when the more we understand some of our own reactions, we don't revert it back to ourselves as much. There's some research that shows if I sat and talked at you 9/10 of the conversation, I would come away thinking, we had a great conversation, and I've projected onto you qualities I like in other people, and you barely got 2 sentences out. So we've got a lot of learning to do about how we bias ourselves.
That
was a long answer, sorry.
That's all right. That's what we're here for. I'm also interested in hearing from you on, especially as a journalist, on the research side, and how today we're getting so much content on from bloggers, and what a blog really is thoughts, right? Thoughts with most of the time, I think, maybe not a lot of research, and the ones who do, I think, are doing a great job at it. Where is research, the journalism and aspect of research, and how much time you would put into your content that you developed is maybe losing track a little bit? Would you think?
I think you're right. I believe if people go really deep into their research, not just in the expected sources but the unexpected, they do build a visibility. And I know there's a lot of people becoming visible who don't do much research. But I do believe there's a place for that, because then you can give actionable ideas. You actually can cover a story as it happened, and you're building your expertise on covering what is. And inadvertently, it's the best way to pull in the people you admire. I mean, I'm one of those people who only was forced to get on Twitter so no one else would use my name. And then they said, you know, keep these different lists. So I keep a list of the behavioral scientists I like, the journalists I like, and then the areas I cover, quotability and connective behavior, there's a subset. And I just started looking at them each morning, and I thought, wow, are they good? So then I click on what they're reading, and I put it in a file for my stuff. And if I make reference to them, then suddenly you're befriending people. And people probably never would have given me the time of day, or realizing there's ways we're helpful. I've had 2 people call yesterday saying, I'm working on this slant. Who would you suggest I talk to? And because they've helped me in the past, they say, well, these 2, this is why, and maybe this one, just, I caution you about this thing. So I believe there's a camaraderie among people. If they raise the bar, they shine a spotlight on apt researchers or newsmakers, then they're making their process distinctive. But the final part, of course, is what's your distinctive side? Because you and I have seen extremely different personality styles that are all very successful. So I think it's finding your own voice and being clear on the beat you want to cover and on the way, your approach, so people can rely on you having that approach when they come back to you again. That's the next stage.
So how do you become quotable? How do you take that to even to the next level? And I know that's something that you're talking about quite a bit right now, in terms of showing not your authentic self and bringing that out into a quotable situation.
I think the most important thing, the more we know about something, and the smarter we are, the more boring we usually get, because it takes us a long time to be specific. So first, get specific sooner. What's the specific detail that proves the general conclusion, not the reverse? And that's hard, but once you do that, you also know what you mean. And I also think, what are the ways you compare it to something else? What's the example that pulls people into the next step? And so ways to be quotable are that level of specificity and how relevant it is to the audience to which you're speaking. If you can make extremely relevant, like I believe in situational selling rather than product selling. describe the situation in which it solves a problem, or they're going to enjoy it more. Even specificity, saying in only 3 steps in 4 minutes you can get this done and move on. That concreteness pulls people in. But I think the last part is, so it's relevance, interestingness, and actionable. So it's like, I call it AIR, A-I-R. But interestingness means it's so peculiar or so unexpected or so surprising or so inspiring. Paul Ekman says there's 7 universally expressed emotions, and shock certainly helps. So I think, where's the detail that will just strike at people's heart or mind and be emblematic of the next thing you want to say? And so unless you're like Richard Branson, who is authentic, and he can look meaningful and interesting even when he doesn't say something that's that interesting. So you get different ways as you go up the ladder of being well known that people project onto who you are. Because relative to a lot of executives, you know he's sitting there and just saying how he feels, and he's real clear about who he is. So that level of authenticity means that you don't have to be innately interesting in the message right now, but you know he's telling you the truth. At least that's our presumption.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about originality. It's becoming harder for people to become original in a sea of what we're calling this big data world, where there's so much content, there's so many people talking about the same things. Mm-hmm. I mean, the subjects out there are being reiterated at this point. How do you become
about mobile, big data, social?
Right.
Yeah.
How do you become original? How do you take your originality and perhaps maybe an original take on something that either doesn't exist or take something that does and rise out of the sea of same?
The sea of same. I like that. That's a good example right there, because it'll stick in people's mind. I think because we have access to much more interesting situations and people, it's a matter of our being open to not just be in one domain and filter bubble ourselves. So for example, there's some brilliant writing going on in hospital and medical care, where they're putting the face on the problem and the solution they had. So if you take your one domain and you dip into another and you say, they did this in this situation. So I think Atul Gawande, about 6 months ago, he's a famous doctor, wrote the checklist. He went into Cheesecake Factory, and he wrote a brilliant long piece about the way they had systematized everything. It actually boosted people's learning potential, their sense of themselves, and they had much higher accuracy in what they were preparing. And in a real indictment under the guise of all that, he said, the hospitals aren't nearly as accountable, and probably there's more at stake. So he took one domain and really went deep into it. And that's one of my favorite ways to do it, is to take people out of one setting, put them in another, and say, if they can do it, why can't we?
Mm-hmm. So maybe the surrounding, the environment that we're all in is something that we can take a look at that'll help us think differently.
Step into a different environment. If you usually go in one environment, go to a different one. Mm-hmm. If you're usually hanging around a certain kind of people, hang around others. I mean, way before analytics geeks got to be so popular, I got to meet some in the first Obama campaign. And they were literally walked over, not given credit, not given adequate information. In general, I don't mean in his campaign, but across the board. So it took a lot of deep listening. And I finally brought in a surgeon who was a good listener and really famous. And he said, I want you to sit here and I'm going to ask them questions, like there's a life at stake. I want you to listen about how much they can tell you haven't even known how to ask about. And within a half hour, everybody's jumping up and down saying, why didn't you tell us this? Mm-hmm. So I believe in other domains. It makes life more interesting too.
Mm-hmm. I'm really curious too. You're an Emmy Award winner, and I think that's that's not something that everyone can say. How did you? What was one of the most important parts for you in terms of how you received that, or why you think you received it?
Well, one of the most controversial parts was because we were so unionized. I was a face person, which means I made 3 times as much money as my editor and my camera person. And the thing that was so confounding is there's sometimes we weren't able to talk directly about the story because we weren't supposed to be talking to each other. And so we'd go in the back alley. So my cameraman was 6'7", African American, and my editor was 5'0", Chinese American. And we were all very intense about what we're doing. So we decided we would all meet and talk about the format. Format, come in close, say something benign, sweep back to a situation that relates to what we're doing, go back and interview that person who represents the outrage, the injustice, and an unexpected face, then talk about a set of facts, then jump to another interview where someone was causing the problem and warmly interview them. And they would call it ambush now, but I'd really tell them, I want to find out about this problem. And I would have a watch on, which I could feel going like this, because my cameraman invented it. And basically I knew on tap 5, they're going to be tight in right there on your face as you're answering the question. And then it'd come back to the benign person who was acting so decent, who was getting crushed by the situation, and they would have a response, and then I'd do, here's the action. We collectively came up with that format. It was like a dance choreography thing to do it. She got to edit it, so we do it over time. So we were already ready in half the time. And we got so into it that the Discovery Channel approached us because a friend of my editor knew about it. And they said, do another one of these. What happened here in California that would relate to the rest of the world? So it's, again, the idea of get very direct, get specific, say, I didn't like what you did, that I had to do that, why? Iteratively call each other on stuff. And then you're bonded. So, you know, if I say, yes, I like that, what it means is, yes, I like that. So we'd sit in that back alley. One time I got up in my muddy bottom because we forgot, and we were going to almost go on camera, and she grabbed back, and we had to go find another skirt for me. But I'll never forget that time because we were so totally different. We used to at first get so upset, we go, no, that's not true, that's not it. And we'd been there screaming, and then we realized we don't need to do that. I believe in quick learning with people much different that have different talents. Mm-hmm. And I noticed a lot of the crews, they all got along, but they're all the same, mm-hmm. and they never told each other when they're bugged. So a cameraman would sort of go like this sometimes. So when the person was saying something important, it wasn't on them.
Yeah. Oh, boy.
Anyway.
Well, tell me about the story of that you put together.
Well, the story that I won the Emmy for was the United Way was trying to kick other federations of charities out of the workplace. And the research showed that the more federations, the more choice, the more people gave, the higher the amount. And they were giving their frank feelings. The head of the United Way at that point, exchanging it in emails that made them look very bad. Things float to reporters. So the secretary of one of them actually sent it to me. So I asked him a question. I said, how does that match up, whether you just said that you think it's good that they're all here with this? So you're never judged by your own region because then the votes could be gamed. So it was in the Midwest. So we all knew that I didn't have a chance of winning because everybody is so decent in the Midwest. Prejudice, you know, I had prejudice. So I literally was daydreaming at the time, and my husband said, Kare, they're mispronouncing your name, but they did say your name. So it was a shock to us all. Again, my bias. People were so outraged more in the Midwest than they were in my own viewing area, which was Northern California.
Interesting.
And it didn't correct the problem. It took somebody else blasting them from back east, and then it was corrected.
Oh, okay.
So it's humbling.
Yeah. How has that changed your life?
Well, I think I'm like you, Bryan. I see life as scenes, and I think, what would make it different? Like, how do you make the pie larger? What shifts things? Why is that person really saying it? I guess I get bugged when people have their own bias and they project it onto the person rather than trying to understand why that person is doing what they're doing. I mean, listening to Grover Norquist, there are a lot about what he does that I disagree with, but there are some things he said today when I was listening driving here I absolutely agree with. And the more you find unlikely allies, you're going to get a better story. You're going to maybe cover other sides of them. So since part of this is about how we develop content that's compelling and credible and spreadable, I think doing the unexpected and finding other parts of people so you don't perpetuate a stereotype, you add another facet to it, and that people trust that you're going to do well by them, even if they don't like all that you did.
Right.
I think that's part of the learning process that's going on now, where our country is increasingly partisan, according to all kinds of research, and not just in politics. And we don't know how to civil conversations or to reach shared agreement. That's one thing I want content to do in companies is people are from very different silos, self-imposed or organizational. They can get to the point. They can stick to that point. They can have a conversational thread and come with an outcome that they're all going to stick to.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about rapport and how you gain rapport with the person that you're interviewing, the person, obviously, I'm hoping I'm gaining some rapport with you. How do you gain rapport as a journalist? This is one of the, I think, the best traits anyone can have in any job, obviously. As you're looking at social media and you're looking at journalistic views and how you're approaching just life in general, what's rapport? I mean, how do you gain it?
I think it's a magical thing where you're trying to get in sync with someone and really step in their shoes and say, what's going on with them right now? How do I serve us and that person? And because we project so much, you don't know why someone does something. You can just notice they're doing it. But if you don't bring out their better side that they like themselves early on, it's going to be a rough road the whole rest of the time. And so some people can take umbrage a lot more easily. Others, things just roll off their back. Others, it appears to. So I think getting in sync is not rushing into things right away. It's sort of like not moving around, talking a lot, looking trustworthy as they appear to look, and showing genuine respect. I'll say some physiological things. You have a natural face and pose that people will reach out and respond to. Some people's faces look more austere, and in repose they can look pissed or disrespectful when they're just looking thoughtful. And as we get older, that's after age 25, our face tends to go down. And there's something like called screen face, where if you're looking down a lot, you look up and you still look preoccupied, not interested. The upside is there's so few times, like you've been giving me this total attention the whole time, which is just unusual. And when you give someone the total attention and you look real connected, I think people just blossom. And that means that we're not looking around, we're not looking at a screen. I think that just lets them exhale psychologically and be more open to stuff. The downside, as the last part is, there may be, say, 5 things that you liked about what I was doing, and then I did one thing that irritated you or made you fearful, and that rises to the top in your mind more than the others. So there has to be a good ratio of comfort before things go poorly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here today.
Oh, I enjoyed it.
This has been fantastic. I think we could do this a couple more times. I've got more questions for you, but unfortunately we're out of time here today.
Good questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.